When the NWOBHM reached America, it didn't produce one thing. It produced two. And those two things spent the next decade running in completely opposite directions. One toward the most aggressive, technically uncompromising music that the genre had ever produced, and the other toward the most commercially successfully heavy music in history. Same source, same transmission, two completely different destinations. This is not an accident, and it's not a contradiction. It's what happens when a musical form gets exported to a culture that it wasn't designed for. And that culture finds two completely different uses for it. This is the story of how NWOBHM crossed the Atlantic and why that crossing broke it in two. The American heavy music landscape in 1980 was not waiting for the NWOBHM. It had its own commercial infrastructure, the arena rock circuit, the FM radio format, the major label system generating reliable returns from established acts, and its own developing underground. The hardcore movement building its DIY infrastructure in the same years that the NWOBHM was building its own. What the American landscape was missing was a model for how heaviness could be technically sophisticated, rhythmically aggressive, and compositionally serious, all without being domesticated by the arena machine or limited by hardcore's deliberate rejection of musical complexity. The NWOBHM was that model, but it arrived in America not through commercial channels. It arrived the way all significant musical transmissions arrive before the commercial infrastructure catches up. Through the dedicated attention of a small number of people who understood what they were hearing, and they understood that it changed what was possible.
My mother was a witch. She was burned alive.
One of those people was a teenage Danish-American kid living in Los Angeles who had an obsessive import record habit and a set of drums. And the specific records he was collecting in 80-81 changed the trajectory of heavy music more completely than almost any other act of listening in the genre's history. Lars Ulrich wasn't discovering the NWBHM from the outside. He was also an active participant in the import culture that brought NWOBHM records to American audiences before any domestic distribution existed to carry them.
That if, from my own point of view, if I didn't have a few of those bands committed, then I wasn't going to do it because I didn't want to do it half-assed.
Corresponding with British bands, collecting their independent singles with this obsessive dedication of someone who understood that what he was hearing represented a development of the form that American heavy music had never produced.
Call me, baby, call me.
The Diamond Head connection is the most documented instance of what that import obsession produced. Diamond Head from Canterbury, never commercially significant in the conventional sense, never achieving the major label breakthrough that perhaps an Iron Maiden's trajectory had demonstrated was possible. What they contributed to the form's development was completely disproportionate to their commercial footprint. The riff as extended compositional statement, not the two-bar figure repeated as structural foundation, but the developed musical idea moving through harmonic, rhythmic variations across the song's architecture. Am I Evil?
My mother was a witch.
The Prince. The structural logic of those recordings demonstrated that heavy music could sustain compositional development across extended song lengths with an intentionality that American heavy music wasn't exploring with any comparable seriousness. The bands that change what subsequent musicians understand to be possible are not always the bands that sell the most records. Sometimes they are the bands that a specific young drummer in California found in an import bin and just played it obsessively until the compositional logic had been fully absorbed by him and was ready to be expressed in a different context, with different musicians, different ambitions. Kill 'Em All, 1983. The NWOBHM's compositional sophistication, hardcore's velocity synthesized into something neither tradition had produced alone. The songs developed through multiple distinct sections with a compositional intentionality that hardcore's three-chord directness had specifically excluded. The arrangement logic comes directly from what Ulrich had absorbed from Diamond Head and broader NWOBHM bands. The aggression and the tempo come from somewhere else entirely. And that's just one transmission. The technical and compositional inheritance feeding directly into the Bay Area synthesis with hardcore. But Ulrich wasn't the only American receiving the NWOBHM signal in 1980. And the other transmission landed somewhere completely different. Iron Maiden's American breakthrough provided the commercial evidence that the NWOBHM could reach a mass audience without compromising its musical identity. And the commercial infrastructure drew a conclusion from that evidence that had nothing to do with Diamond Head's compositional sophistication or Motorhead's velocity. The conclusion the American commercial infrastructure drew from Iron Maiden's success was, heavy music with this level of melodic intelligence can sell. The question was, what you did with that conclusion. The Number of the Beast, 1982. Significant American sales. Arena-level touring, all demonstrating to the American commercial infrastructure that British heavy music of genuine technical sophistication could reach a mass audience without the melodic accessibility optimizing that FM radio had established as a requirement.
What did I see?
The twin guitar attack of the great Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. The compositional complexity, Steve Harris's bass-driven song structures. None of these properties had been softened for American consumption. The record was as uncompromising in its musical identity as anything the NWOBHM had produced. And it sold. That was the commercial proof the American arena rock infrastructure needed before it could even acknowledge that the form it had been ignoring had built an audience it hadn't anticipated. Bruce Dickinson's vocal performance deserves specific attention here. Rob Halford had already demonstrated that range, power, theatrical delivery were compatible with heavy music's confrontational identity. Dickinson went further. The vocal line carried lyrical content, that narrative rather than a statement. The storytelling function. Heavy music as dramatic form rather than just sonic force. That gave Iron Maiden's recordings a dramatic coherence that distinguished them from every other form of heavy music that was operating at the same time. And it proved enormously influential on the American bands building their own approaches in the NWOBHM's wake. not just in what they played, but in how they understood what heavy music was capable of. The only British heavy band breaking through in America in the early 80s. The other breakthrough came from a completely different direction. And it carried a completely different lesson. Def Leppard through something else entirely. Through a producer who understood that their melodic intelligence was capable of, and through a commercial infrastructure that was ready to scale that intelligence to a size nobody in the NWOBHM had imagined was even possible. And the record they made together didn't just chart. It sold 10 million copies in the United States alone. Pyromania, 1983. In the story of how a Sheffield band got from the NWOBHM's pub circuit to 10 million American sales is, in miniature, the story of what commercial infrastructure learned from the NWOBHM and what it decided to do with that lesson. Robert John Mutt Lange was not a heavy music producer in the sense that his background was rooted in the form's specific traditions. He was a producer of exceptional technical sophistication and commercial intelligence who understood how to build recordings of maximum emotional impact through arrangement clarity, vocal production, and sonic density. His work with AC/DC on Highway to Hell in 1979 demonstrated his capacity to preserve a heavy band's essential identity while delivering the production clarity that commercial radio demanded. And what his work with Def Leppard demonstrated was something more consequential, that the NWOBHM's melodic intelligence separated from the scene's DIY rawness and developed through Lange's production philosophy to its logical commercial conclusion. High and Dry in 81, Pyromania in 83. The rawness was gone. The DIY urgency was gone. The confrontational directness that the pub circuit had required, gone. What remained was the heaviness, the guitar density, the rhythm section's physical authority, the volume, the distortion. The lesson the commercial infrastructure drew from Pyromania's success was not the lesson of the NWOBHM's DIY infrastructure. It was the lesson of what the NWOBHM's melodic potential could achieve when developed through the right production philosophy and delivered through the right commercial channels. Pyromania wasn't the peak of that development, but it was the proof of concept. The NWOBHM crossed the Atlantic and split into two transmissions. The technical and compositional sophistication fed the Bay Area synthesis with hardcore and produced the most significant heavy music mutation of the 1980s. But the melodic intelligence and production ambition fed the commercial mainstream's development and produced the most commercially successful heavy music of the decade. So here's what the NWOBHM's full arc actually demonstrates. If you followed it from Birmingham in 68 to Pyromania in 83 to the Bay Area in 83, heavy music doesn't develop through the commercial infrastructure. It develops in the spaces the commercial infrastructure ignores. In the rehearsal rooms, the pub back rooms, import bins, tape trading. The infrastructure catches up after the form has already proved its viability. And when it catches up, it scales what's been built, but it also selects from it. It takes the parts it can monetize and leaves the rest for the underground to develop further. The NWOBHM gave the commercial infrastructure the melodic intelligence, and it gave the underground the compositional sophistication and the velocity. The commercial infrastructure built hair metal. The underground built thrash. And thrash built death metal and black metal and doom and everything that followed. Every significant development in heavy music's subsequent history draws from what the NWOBHM established.